The wind carried the smell of burning wood and tamarind across the narrow streets of Ashok Nagar, a modest neighborhood in Chennai. Small houses stood side by side, their walls faded by sun and rain. Goats walked lazily past sleepy tea stalls, and children played barefoot, chasing after an old rubber ball. It was a regular day, or at least it seemed so until the laughter began. Lakshmi Pichai stood outside her small home, her thin sari tucked tightly around her waist, her eyes fixed on the tiny blackboard in her hand. Sundar, barely 10 years old, sat cross-legged on a mat, solving a math problem she had written. He was skinny, with sharp eyes that blinked often, as if trying to absorb the world faster than anyone else. Then came the voices. "Why are you wasting time, Lakshmi?" shouted a neighbor, shaking her head. "He will never be more than what we all are. Tea boy, shop worker, maybe a call center job if lucky." Others joined in. Some laughed, some mocked kindly, others just stared with disbelief. For them, the sight of a woman trying to teach her son mathematics with chalk and wood was amusing. But to Lakshmi, it was sacred. "Do not worry about them," Lakshmi whispered to Sundar, brushing a fallen leaf from his shoulder. "You just keep learning. One day, they will not laugh." But Sundar looked down, his lips trembling. "AMMA. ... Why do they say I can't do it?" She held his face gently in her hands. "Because they only see what's in front of them. They do not know what lives inside your heart." Inside that small home, there was barely enough to eat. They had no fan, and during summer, they would soak a towel in water and place it over their heads to sleep. Sundar often shared his dinner with street dogs, while Lakshmi lied to him, saying she wasn't hungry when the truth was, they had only one meal. But there was something unusual about Lakshmi. She had a deep, quiet strength. Not the loud kind that storms through doors, but the soft kind that bends without breaking, like bamboo in the wind. Her husband, Raghunatha Pichai, worked far away in a factory and sent what little money he could. But it was Lakshmi who carried the home, the dreams, and the fire. Every night after dinner, she would light a single lamp and tell Sundar stories, not fairy tales, but real ones. Stories of struggle, of scientists, of people who rose from the dust to touch the stars. And in every story, the hero had one thing in common: they never gave up. "Amma, can I become like them?" Sundar once asked, his eyes wide. Lakshmi smiled, touching his heart with her fingers. "You already are." The next morning, Lakshmi took Sundar to a local bookshop. She didn't have enough money for school books, but she begged the old shopkeeper, Mr. Venkat, to let Sundar read in the back corner. "Every day for 1 hour," she said. "He won't touch anything. Just read." Mr. Venkat, with a sigh, agreed. And so, for months, Sundar sat between tall piles of dusty books, flipping pages faster than most adults could. He read about magnets, metals, space, and electricity, and every day, Lakshmi stood outside, waiting patiently, holding a small tin in her hand to collect leftover rice from kind neighbors for dinner. People laughed at her again. "She thinks her son will become a scientist," one woman said. "No, he will just end up selling phones," said another. But Lakshmi kept walking, one step at a time. Then came a day that shook their world. The principal of the nearby English medium school, St. Mary's, visited the shop. He noticed Sundar reading a complex book on engineering. Curious, he asked a few questions. To his surprise, Sundar answered clearly, even correcting one of his assumptions. The principal was stunned. "Who taught you?" he asked. "My amma," Sundar replied. The man visited Lakshmi that evening. "We want to give your son a scholarship," he said. "Full fees, books, uniform, ... everything. We've never seen a mind like his." Tears rolled down Lakshmi's face, but she folded her hands. "Thank you, sir. This is all I ever prayed for." Sundar joined the school. It was a new world: English-speaking boys in polished shoes, lunchboxes with sandwiches, and lessons filled with words he couldn't pronounce. On the first day, he came home quietly. "Amma," he said. They laughed when I spoke. Lakshmi took his hand and placed it over a small radio. It was playing crackling sound-static voices and songs. "Do you know how this works?" Sundar shook his head. "Inside this, there are wires and circuits. Messy, strange things. But when they connect properly, they make magic. You are like that radio. One day your voice will connect with the world. Just be patient." Those words stayed with Sundar for the rest of his life. In school, he struggled at first. English was hard, classmates were cruel, and his shoes often had holes. But Lakshmi never let him stop. She stitched his socks by hand, walked him to school, and waited every day under a neem tree until his classes were over. One day Sundar topped the science exam. The teacher, shocked, asked, "How did you manage this?" Sundar smiled and said, "I just kept learning." That evening, Lakshmi served him rice with a small piece of mango pickle, something she saved for special days. They sat on the floor, and she said, "You are growing like a tree, but do not forget the roots." "Never, Amma," Sundar replied. Yet the world was not kind for long. A major flood hit Chennai that year. Water entered their home. Books were destroyed, and they had to take shelter in a government school. Sundar cried that night. "All my books are gone," he sobbed. Lakshmi held him tight. "Books can be lost, but what you've learned is already inside you. No flood can wash that away." They rebuilt slowly. Neighbors helped, but many still mocked her quiet confidence. "What is the use of so much struggle?" they asked. Lakshmi said nothing. She just pointed to Sundar. As he grew older, Sundar's brilliance started to shine. He won a state-level science competition, and a photo of him was printed in the local newspaper. Lakshmi bought 2 copies. One she kept in her steel trunk. The other she framed and placed near her cooking stove, where she could see it every morning. But just when things seemed hopeful, another storm came. One day, a government officer visited their area. He was selecting students for a national scholarship. When he saw Sundar's record, he looked suspicious. "These marks are too good. Are they real?" he asked. Lakshmi stepped forward. "My son worked for every single one. You are welcome." To test him, the officer smirked. "And you are?" "I am his Amma." He gave Sundar a surprise oral test on the spot. Sundar answered every question. The officer left silently. A week later, a letter arrived. Sundar was selected. This time, the neighbors said nothing, but Lakshmi remembered every word they had said over the years, every laugh, every whisper, every doubt. And she turned it all into quiet fuel. Sundar was now ready to leave for engineering college. On the day he received his acceptance letter to IT Karagar, Lakshmi took out her old radio, placed it in his bag, and said, "Never forget where you began." Sundar hugged her. "I will never forget you, Amma, not even when I go to the moon." "But," Lakshmi just smiled, "I do not want the moon. I just want to see you fly." And so, he left for the next chapter of his journey. What neither of them knew was that the laughter they once heard in the narrow streets of Chennai was about to be replaced by applause that would echo around the world. But before that happened, Sundar had to face the darkest test of his life. The train to Karagar rattled through the countryside like an old dream that refused to stop. Sundar sat by the window, holding the small radio his mother had given him. It was worn, cracked at the edges, but still played music when tuned just right. Every time he looked at it, he saw his Amma's face, as the train rolled into the unfamiliar lands of West Bengal. Sundar stepped off with a heart full of hope and a bag full of books. IT Karagar was vast. The campus had tall buildings, students from every corner of the country, and professors who had studied abroad. Sundar had never seen anything like it. His roommates were friendly, but curious. "Where are you from?" they asked. "Chennai," Sundar replied softly. You're the scholarship boy, right? The one with crazy good marks. He nodded. But, inside, he wondered, will I really fit in here? The first week was a struggle. The lectures were fast, the accent of professors was new, and the assignments seemed impossible. Sundar spent late nights in the library, going over the same line again and again until it made sense. He missed his mother's food. The hostel served bland dal and dry rotis. His roommate complained about the spice level. Sundar just smiled and quietly finished his plate. He knew hunger too well to complain. One evening, while sitting under a tree, he opened the radio again. It crackled. A slow song played. Tears welled up in his eyes. He missed home. He missed Uma, and he missed the comfort of her stories. He called her from a local booth the next day. Amma, I don't know if I can do this. Her voice, tired but warm, replied, remember what the neem tree taught you. Sundar closed his eyes. It grows in the heat. It doesn't need much water. Exactly, she said. You are that tree. Bend, but do not break. In the months that followed, Sundar stopped trying to be like others. He began using his quiet nature as a strength. He listened more, asked questions without fear, and worked harder than anyone else. While others gave up on a tough problem, he stayed in the lab until sunrise. His professors noticed. One of them, Dr. Gopal Rao, a strict man with sharp glasses, once stopped him in the hallway. You solved the last paper's challenge question. Only one student in 10 years has done that. I just kept thinking about it. Sundar replied. Dr. Rao stared at him. Never stop doing that. That small recognition changed everything. Soon Sundar became known as the silent genius. He didn't speak much in class, but when he did, even the professors listened. He made close friends, students who respected not just his intelligence, but his humility. They often came to him for help, and Sundar never said no. Back home, Lakshmi saved every rupee she could. She stitched for long hours to send him small amounts of money. Sometimes, she skipped meals to afford the courier charges for sending him small gift socks, a warm cap, or tamarind rice packed in banana leaves. When Sundar received those packages, he would sit alone in his room and eat slowly, savoring every bite. His roommates would joke, "You have the best food, man." He would just smile. In his final year, Sundar worked on a project about silicon chips. He believed that one day, technology would change the way people lived. But more than that, he wanted to make it simple for everyone. His project got noticed by a foreign professor visiting from Stanford University. After the presentation, the professor walked up to him. "What's your name?" "Sundar Pichai. Have you thought about studying abroad?" Sundar hesitated. "I have no money for that." "Money is not the problem," the professor said. "Vision is, and you have it." He gave Sundar his card and said, "Apply to Stanford. I'll recommend you." Sundar sent in his application with shaking hands. Weeks passed. He tried not to think about it. But one rainy morning, as he checked the hostile notice board, a letter fell from his folder. It was from the United States. He opened it. "Congratulations. You have been accepted to Stanford University." He couldn't believe it. He ran to the nearest phone booth. "Uma," he shouted. "I got in." Lakshmi was silent for a second. Then she asked gently, "How much will it cost?" Sundar's voice lowered. "A lot more than we have." She didn't hesitate. "We will find a way." And she did. Lakshmi went door to door, asking for help. She sold her gold earrings, her last piece of jewelry, and borrowed money from kind neighbors. One man, Mr. Ramaswamy, gave her half his savings. "Your boy is going places. Let him fly." When Sundar boarded the flight to America, it was his first time on a plane. As he looked out the window, he thought of his mother walking barefoot on hot roads, holding a pot of water, and teaching him with chalk and blackboard. Stanford was another world. Tall buildings, international students, computers faster than anything he had seen. Sundar felt like a small fish in a giant ocean. But just like in Karagar, he stayed quiet, listened carefully, and kept learning. He walked everywhere because he couldn't afford a bike. He shared rooms with 5 students. He worked late nights at the library, skipped fancy outings, and ate simple food. He sent every dollar he could save back home. One day he presented a project in class about how people interact with tools. Technology, he said, should feel like second nature, like reaching for a light switch in the dark. The professor nodded slowly. You think like a designer. That line stayed with him. Years later, after finishing Stanford, Sundar got offers from many companies. But one caught his eye, a small company with a strange name, Google. When he told Lakshmi, she asked, "What does it do?" He laughed. "It helps people find things, like answers." "Yes, amma, like answers." He joined Google in 2004. His job? To improve the toolbar. It was simple but powerful. Sundar made it better, faster, smarter. One day he had an idea. What if we made a browser? Our own. Some laughed. Others said, we already have Internet Explorer. But Sundar believed the web needed something faster, cleaner. He worked quietly, building a team, testing endlessly. And in 2008, Chrome was born. Millions used it. Then billions. He had changed how people touched the internet. And yet, he stayed the same. Humble.com, always listening. Meanwhile, in Chennai, Lakshmi still lived in the same house. Her walls were still cracked, her stove still old. But on one shelf, she kept a framed photo of Sundar in his office at Google. She showed it to anyone who visited. "This is my son," the one they laughed at. People now spoke differently. They respected her, even praised her. But Lakshmi never changed. She still wore the same cotton sari, still stitched for others, still gave extra food to the street dogs. And then, one morning, a letter arrived from the Prime Minister's office, Narendra. Modi wanted to meet Sundar. Lakshmi sat quietly, the letter in her lap. "You're meeting the Prime Minister of India." Sundar smiled. "Only because I had the best teacher in the world." And as he prepared for the meeting, he looked out at the world he had helped build, a world where no one laughed at Lakshmi Pichai anymore. It was early morning in New Delhi. The air was still cool, and the roads were lined with police cars and black SUVs. A crowd had gathered near the Prime Minister's residence. Cameras, journalists, and curious eyes all pointed in one direction. Inside, a black car, Sundar Pichai sat quietly, adjusting the collar of his simple white shirt. Beside him was a small leather notebook. It didn't have any business notes or big plans inside. It had something else, a letter from his mother, written in Tamil, folded gently, and kept close to his heart. "Read this before every important day," Lakshmi had told him when he left for America. "It will remind you who you are." The car stopped. A security officer opened the door. "Sir, this way." As Sundar stepped out, flashes from cameras lit up the morning air. People whispered his name. "That's Sundar Pichai, Google's CEO, the boy from Chennai." But in Sundar's mind, he was still the boy sitting on the floor, with a chalkboard, solving math under his Uma's watchful eyes. He walked into the meeting room. There sat Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Calm and focused. "Namaste, Sundar ji," Modi said warmly. Sundar returned the greeting with a slight bow. The conversation began. They spoke of India's digital future, of bringing internet to villages, of teaching young children how to dream beyond their surroundings. "Your journey," Modi said, "is what India needs to see. You are proof that with the right values, anything is possible." Sundar listened respectfully. Then he said something that surprised everyone in the room. Double quotes, "Sir, if I may, I think India's future will be decided by how we treat our mothers." There was silence. "My mother," he continued, "taught me math with a chalkboard. She taught me kindness by feeding stray dogs. She taught me patience by sitting hours outside libraries. She didn't have a degree, but she taught me everything. Modi nodded. Then she is the real teacher of the digital age. That line made headlines. Lakshmi Pichai, the silent force behind Google's CEO, wrote one newspaper. People started asking questions about her. Where did she live? What did she do? How did she raise such a son? Sundar returned to Chennai a week later. He didn't bring reporters or bodyguards. He came home as a son. Lakshmi was in the kitchen, grinding spices, on a stone slab. "Amma," Sundar called softly. She looked up and smiled. "You're back?" He touched her feet. "They all want to meet you now." She laughed. "But I'm just a mother." "And that," he said, "is what makes you great." Soon, Sundar arranged a small event at his childhood school. It wasn't a grand stage, just a classroom, with wooden benches and old fans spinning slowly. He invited students, teachers, and some neighbors who once doubted them. Lakshmi sat in the front row. Sundar took the stage. "I used to sit here," he said, pointing to a corner bench. "I was afraid to speak in English. I didn't have good shoes. I didn't have fancy books, but I had something better. I had a mother who believed in me when no one else did." The students listened closely. "You may not have everything today, but if you have belief, kindness, and patience, you already have a strong foundation." After the speech, he walked up to his old science teacher and handed him a gift, a new set of lab equipment for the school. "Thank you for not giving up on me," Sundar said. The teacher's eyes filled with tears. As the day ended, a journalist asked Lakshmi, "How did you raise him?" She looked down and smiled. "I didn't raise him to become great. I raised him to be good." That single quote spread across India. People began celebrating mothers like Lakshmi. Schools held events to honor parents. A small movement started, one that valued the silent sacrifices of women who stayed out of the spotlight but held entire families together. But not everyone was happy. A well-known tech executive in America gave an interview. "Sundar is lucky, but he didn't build Google. Many others worked harder." Sundar read the comment quietly. Then he called his team and said, "We don't answer with words. We answer with work." Soon, Google launched a project in India providing free Wi-Fi in train stations. Millions, who had never touched the internet before, suddenly had access. One boy from a small town used the Wi-Fi to prepare for exams and became the top student in his district. His mother later said, "My son used to wash cars. Now he teaches math." Thank you, Google. Thank you, Sundar. When Sundar read that story, he sent her a personal letter. "Your son's journey reminds me of mine. Never stop believing in him." Then, something unexpected happened. Lakshmi was invited to speak at an international conference on motherhood and education in New York. "Me?" she asked, stunned. Double quotes. "Yes," said the organizer. "You represent the soul behind India's brightest minds." Sundar arranged everything: the flight, the speech, the translator. On the day of the event, Lakshmi stood on stage in a simple sari. Lights above her, hundreds watching. She spoke in Tamil. Her voice was soft, but strong. "I do not know English. I do not know computers. But I know how to teach love, and how to make rice with nothing in the house." The audience laughed, then clapped. She continued, "My son is not successful because he reached America. He is successful because he never forgot India." When she finished, the crowd gave her a standing ovation. Later, Sundar hugged her backstage. "Uma," he said, "today the whole world saw what I've always known." Lakshmi looked at him gently. "Now it's your turn to help others fly." That night, they walked in Central Park, side by side. No cameras, no press. Just a son and a mother. And as they walked under the moonlight, Lakshmi said, "Do you remember the old radio?" "I still have it," Sundar replied. "It reminds me that signals can travel far, even from a small home in Chennai to the whole world." But even as the world celebrated them, a storm was rising. Not outside, but inside Sundar. Pressure, doubt, fear. He had reached great heights. But something inside felt heavy, and what happened next would test everything he had learned from his amma. The lights inside Sundar's office at Google never truly went off. It was the kind of place where silence came only in short moments. Between meetings, between decisions, between billion-dollar ideas. Sundar sat alone, staring at the whiteboard, filled with plans, numbers, and deadlines. He was now the CEO, the face of one of the most powerful companies in the world, but tonight, he felt something strange. He felt alone. A knock on the door. Double quotes. "Sir, the board is waiting." Sundar stood up, adjusted his glasses, and walked into the meeting room. Faces stared back at him, some eager, some doubtful. They spoke of market share, competitors, and new launches. They wanted answers. They wanted magic, and Sundar gave it, calmly, precisely. But after the meeting ended, he walked back to his office and sat on the floor. His phone buzzed. A message from his amma. "Are you eating well, Kanna?" He stared at the message for a long time. He hadn't eaten all day, he replied. "Not yet. Soon." Then he took a deep breath and leaned back. A storm was building inside Google. People were arguing over products, privacy rules, internal politics. Some said the company was moving too slow. Others said it was moving too fast. Media started publishing articles questioning Sundar's leadership. Is Sundar too soft for Silicon Valley? One headline read, He didn't respond publicly, but inside, he felt the cracks. He remembered the time in school when a teacher had once told him, "You need to speak louder if you want to be heard." He had spent years learning to lead without shouting, to build without fear. But now, that very quality was being tested. One night, during a product crisis, his team had failed to meet a deadline. A senior engineer stormed into the room, frustrated. "We're losing ground, Sundar. Why aren't you pushing harder?" Sundar remained quiet for a moment, then said, "Do you think shouting will build faster code?" The engineer blinked. "No, sir." "Then let's go fix it." But when the door closed, Sundar sat down, his hands shaking. He called home. "Amma," he said, "sometimes I feel like the boy in a room full of giants." Lakshmi was quiet for a moment, then she said, "Do you remember that day when you had no shoes and the boys in class laughed at you?" "Yes," he whispered. "What did you do?" "I kept walking." "Then keep walking now." Those simple words gave him strength. But another challenge was on the way, one he never expected. A data leak incident happened. Users were upset. The government wanted answers. And Google's name was in the middle of the storm. Sundar was called to testify before the United States. Congress. News channels flashed headlines. Google's CEO to face lawmakers. Will Sundar Pichai survive this test? The night before the hearing, Sundar sat by his window, looking at the sky. He opened a small leather notebook. Uma's letter was still there. He read the last line again. "Even if the whole world is louder than you, your truth will speak." He closed his eyes. The next morning, the hearing room was packed. Cameras pointed at him. Politicians sat with papers, ready to ask hard questions. Sundar sat at the table, calm but focused. "Mr. Pichai," one member asked sharply, "can Google track where I am sitting right now?" Sundar replied, "Not without your permission, sir." The room chuckled, but Sundar didn't smile. He answered every question with clarity and respect. He didn't defend himself with pride. He defended the truth with humility. When the hearing ended, people expected headlines like "CEO under fire." Instead, they read, "Pichai keeps his cool. Humility wins in Washington." The quiet CEO, who answered with facts. When he returned to office, a junior engineer walked up to him. "Sir," he said, "you gave us all courage." Sundar smiled gently. "We lead best when we stay grounded." But he knew this was only one storm. More would come, and through it all, he kept one promise to never forget who he was and where he came from. Meanwhile, in Chennai, Lakshmi continued her quiet life. She cooked for neighbors, fed birds on the rooftop, and prayed each morning with folded hands. But her health had started to weaken. She didn't tell Sundar. She didn't want to worry him. But one evening, she fainted while cooking. A neighbor rushed her to the hospital. When Sundar got the call, he was in a board meeting. He stood up, told everyone, "My mother needs me," and walked out. He flew to Chennai. That night, the hospital smelled of medicine and antiseptic. Sundar walked in, heart pounding. Lakshmi lay on the bed, an oxygen mask covering her mouth. She saw him and smiled weakly. "Amma," he said, taking her hand. "Why didn't you tell me?" She pressed his hand. "Because I knew you'd come." The doctor said it was exhaustion. Her heart was tired. She needs rest, peace, less worry, the doctor said. Sundar looked at her. "Amma, come live with me in America." She shook her head. "This is my home, my birds, my plants, my people." He didn't argue. Instead, he sat beside her for 3 days, reading her stories from old Tamil books. On the 4th day she looked better. She said, "Do you know what brings me peace?" "What, Uma?" "That the world sees in you what I saw in you as a child." Sundar's eyes filled with tears. Before he left, he placed the old radio beside her bed. "If you miss me, just turn it on. I'll be there in the sound." She smiled as he flew back. He thought of something. Maybe leadership wasn't about being strong all the time. Maybe it was about remembering your roots, your people, your silence. And soon, he would need that memory again, because the next test was not about business. It was about the values of the world and whether he could protect them. The world was changing fast. People were talking more, listening less. Social media was full of noise. Arguments were louder. Truths were twisted. The internet, once a place of discovery, now often became a battlefield of opinions. Inside Google, Sundar watched the change closely. Every day, he read reports about online hate, fake news, and digital bullying. People were blaming tech giants, politicians, activists, even ordinary users. They all had questions. Why doesn't Google stop this? Who decides what is truth? Why is there so much darkness on the internet? These were not technical problems. They were human problems. And Sundar knew that solving them would need more than code. It would need courage. It started with a small incident. A schoolgirl in India had posted a video on a popular platform about how she was bullied online for speaking English with a local accent. She cried in the video, saying she wanted to stop learning. The video went viral. Sundar saw it late one night in his office. He closed his laptop, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. He remembered how boys had laughed at him too, how he had once gone silent because of shame. How only one person, his Uma, had told him to keep going. He called his team the next morning. "We're not just building tools," he said. "We're shaping the voices of tomorrow. And right now, they need to be heard, not hurt." He launched an internal project called Internet with Heart. Its goal was simple: to create a safer, kinder, online world. Some thought it was just a public move, a way to look good. But Sundar didn't care about opinions. He cared about impact. He partnered with schools across India to teach digital kindness. Google created videos in local languages, showing children how to stay safe online. They gave teachers tools to guide students, and parents ways to protect their kids. The girl who had cried in her video, Sundar personally wrote her a letter. "Your voice matters," he wrote. "Do not stop speaking. The world is better because of people like you." She later sent him a reply. "Thank you, sir. I want to be a teacher now." The movement grew. People started using the hashtag #KindWeb. Stories came from everywhere: students, mothers, teachers all saying that for the first time. They felt seen, protected, but it wasn't all easy. Some media outlets questioned the project. Is this censorship? They asked. Who decides what's kind and what's not? A group of critics even accused Sundar of being too idealistic. The internet is wild, one executive said on television. You can't fix it with emotions. Sundar didn't respond with anger. He responded with action. He launched a transparency report. It showed clearly what content was removed, why it was removed, and how people could appeal decisions. We're not perfect, Sundar said in a global press event, but we are responsible. People began to listen. One morning he received a call from the office of the Dalai Lama. The spiritual leader wanted to meet Sundar. When they met, the Dalai Lama said, "Your mother gave you a rare gift of strength to stay calm when the world is not." Sundar smiled. "She always told me that fire is useful, but warmth saves lives." The Dalai Lama nodded. "May your fire never burn people. May it light the path." That meeting changed Sundar even more. He started spending more time understanding people's stories. He asked his team to build technology that worked for people with disabilities. Google launched features for the blind, for those who couldn't speak, for those who needed help to express themselves. Every time he launched a new feature, he thought of Amma, how she had taught him with no tools, no books, just love. Back in Chennai, Lakshmi watched his speeches on an old TV. Her eyes would tear up, but she never said much. Only once, when a neighbor asked, "Do you ever feel jealous that your son became more famous than you?" She replied softly, "No, because I planted the seed. He became the tree. And now the world sits in his shade." But life, as always, had more tests waiting. A major cyber attack hit Google's systems. Data of millions was at risk. Teams worked day and night. Engineers slept in their chairs. The company's trust was on the line. Sundar didn't sleep. He met every team, listened to every report, and made one thing clear: we fix it, fully, honestly, and fast. He stood before the world and admitted the breach. We failed in protection, but we will not fail in responsibility. His honesty surprised many. Investors feared stock drops, but instead, something unexpected happened. The public trusted him more, because he didn't hide, because he didn't blame others, because he didn't pretend to be perfect. One journalist wrote, "In a world full of noise, Sundar's silence speaks the loudest." Meanwhile, Lakshmi's health had become fragile again. This time, it was serious. Doctors said her heart was weakening. Sundar rushed to her side as she lay in her room, surrounded by plants and quiet prayer bells. She looked up at him. "You look tired," she whispered. "I've been working a lot," he replied. "Don't forget to rest. Even God took a day off." He smiled through tears. She took his hand and said, "You've done enough for the world. Just promise me one thing." "Anything, Amma. Never let the world change your heart." He nodded. A few nights later, Lakshmi passed away peacefully in her sleep. There was no noise, no pain, just calm. Like everything she had done in life, at her funeral, people from all over came: neighbors, teachers, local children, journalists. Someone said, "She never held a phone, but she raised the man who gave phones to the world." As Sundar lit the final flame, he whispered, "You didn't just give me life, Amma. You gave me direction." He returned to California with a piece of her sorry folded inside his notebook, and a new mission: to lead not just with ideas, but with values. Because in the end, history doesn't remember who shouted the loudest. It remembers who stayed kind the longest. And Sundar was ready for one final chapter. One that would make the whole world stop and finally understand the power of a mother's quiet belief. Months passed since Lakshmi Pichai left the world, but her presence stayed in the way Sundar walked with calm, in the way he listened without interrupting, in the way he answered criticism with compassion. He often sat alone in his office at night, looking at the city lights through the glass. He kept her photo on his desk, one where she was smiling gently, wearing her simple cotton sari. He missed her, but he also felt her everywhere and in every kind decision. In every small act of kindness his teams did. In every child who found hope through a Google search. One day, while cleaning his shelf, Sundar found the chalkboard his amma once used to teach him. It had survived through all these years. The wood was faded, and the chalk marks were almost gone, but it was still there. He touched it gently and said, "This is where everything began." And so, he had an idea. He called a meeting not with engineers, not with marketing teams, but with educators. He shared a plan. "We will build the Lakshmi Initiative," he said, "a global project to support mothers who teach, with or without degrees, women who may not know technology, but who shape future leaders every single day." His team listened, surprised, then inspired. The Lakshmi Initiative was launched quietly, but powerfully. It provided tools, simple training, and resources to mothers. In villages, towns, and cities. No computers. No problem. The project used audio lessons through basic phones. No schools nearby. Local learning hubs were built with community help. Within a year, over 500,000 women were part of the program. Some were teaching their children letters for the first time. Others were learning how to start home businesses, and many shared their stories, saying, "We are like Lakshmi Pichai." The project reached global headlines. "Google builds future by honoring its CEO's past," said one news outlet. A popular journalist wrote, "We spend millions on leaders, but the greatest leaders are still mothers who teach with their hearts." Sundar didn't speak much about it in interviews. He just said, "My mother didn't need a stage. She created one for me. This is for women like her." But one day, something unexpected happened. A global education summit invited Sundar to give the closing speech. He agreed, but with one request: "I want to give the speech where my story began." And so, the world watched as Sundar Pichai stood, not in a grand hall, but in his old school in Chennai. The same classroom, the same wooden benches, the chalkboard behind him. In front of him sat school children, mothers, teachers, and global leaders connected through video screens. He began his speech slowly, in soft, clear English. "I was not born to lead. I was born in a small house, where electricity would go out, but dreams never did. I was raised by a mother who didn't speak English, never touched a computer, but taught me everything about life." He paused. "She taught me that silence is not weakness, that respect doesn't come from noise, but from action, that humility can lead, and kindness can change the world." He looked at the children. "You may be sitting here today, feeling small, but let me tell you, big things begin in small rooms. Greatness grows in quiet hearts." He ended the speech by turning round and writing on the chalkboard, just like his amma once did. In simple Tamil, he wrote, "You are enough." That moment went viral around the world. Leaders, celebrities, and students shared it everywhere. Some cried, others were inspired, but everyone understood the message. In the weeks that followed, the Lakshmi Initiative doubled its reach. Other companies joined. New programs started for mothers in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And Sundar's leadership became something deeper, not just about technology, but about humanity. One day, a young boy from a village in Rajasthan wrote him a letter. "Dear Sundar sir, my amma teaches me under a tree with the phone she got from your program. I want to become someone like you. Thank you for giving my amma power." Sundar framed the letter. When asked by a reporter what his greatest success was, he didn't mention Chrome, or Android, or being Google's CEO. He simply said, "My greatest success is that someone's mother now believes her child can dream." And as he walked off the stage that day, holding the old chalkboard, someone in the crowd whispered, "Everyone laughed at Lakshmi Pichai once, but now the whole world stands in her name." Because in the end, it wasn't the computers, the meetings, or the headlines that made history. It was a mother, a chalkboard, and a belief that never gave up. And Sundar Pichai, he didn't just carry that belief, he turned it into a flame that lit the world. The world had changed. Technology had become faster, smarter, everywhere. Phones now answered with voices, cars drove themselves, and children learned in classrooms without walls. But something even bigger had changed. People had begun to remember. The roots behind the wires, the hearts behind the machines. And at the center of that change was a story about a boy named Sundar and a woman named Lakshmi. Her story was being taught in classrooms now. In one small village in Kerala, a teacher wrote her name on the board and asked the students, who knows who she was? A little girl stood up and said, she was the mother who didn't give up. Across the ocean, in a university in Canada, a young Indian student gave a speech. My grandmother taught me under a street lamp. He said, just like Lakshmi Pichai taught Sundar, I'm here because of her. And in a podcast listened to by millions, a host said, we talk about big leaders, but it's time we talk about the silent heroes behind them. Google's new campus in Chennai was named the Lakshmi Center for Learning. On the wall near the entrance, a large quote was written, every great mind starts in a small home. The center offered free training to women across South India, coding, communication, entrepreneurship, all taught in local languages, with childcare and meals included. No one was turned away. Sundar often visited quietly, sitting with mothers, listening to their dreams. One day, a woman with calloused hands told him, sir, I was scared to learn, but now I teach my daughter to use the internet. And she teaches me English. He smiled. My amma would be proud of you, he said. But even with all the global respect, Sundar stayed the same. He lived simply. He still cooked rice the way his mother had taught him, adding a little more water when it looked dry. He still spoke softly in meetings, often asking others, what do you think? And he still carried her chalkboard in his home office. Beside the many awards and certificates the world had given him, then came a moment no one expected. A United Nations Summit on Global Leadership invited Sundar as the closing keynote speaker. The audience included presidents, scientists, activists, and students. As Sundar walked onto the stage, the room fell silent, not because of his fame, but because of his calm presence. He didn't begin with a quote. He didn't show slides. He simply said, this is not my story. This is our story. He spoke of his amma, of her strength and silence, of her courage in poverty, of her belief that one book, one word, one kind act could shape a lifetime. He said, technology is not about machines, it's about making life easier, better, more human. He paused, then he added, and humanity begins at home. The crowd stood up. Not for the company he led, but for the values he carried. The video of his speech broke all records. Millions watched, cried, remembered their own mothers, their own teachers, their own roots. A girl in Nigeria sent a message. I showed my amma the video. Now she wants to open a school in our village. A boy in Pakistan wrote, my mother taught me how to fix shoes. Now I'm learning to fix computers. A teacher in Brazil said, I've started a class called the Lakshmi Hour, where children talk about who believed in them, and Sundar. He kept going. He stepped back from some business duties to focus more on education, kindness, and mother-led programs. He wrote a book not about success, but about simplicity. The title was, What Amma Taught Me. It sold in every corner of the world, but more than that, it touched hearts. Because it was not about fame. It was about faith. Faith that a small home could raise a big dream. Faith that even when people laugh, you can rise. Faith that kindness is not weakness, but power. And so, the story came full circle. The same streets in Chennai, where people once laughed at Lakshmi, now had murals of her face. Schools were named after her. mothers told their children at bedtime. Once upon a time, a woman in a small house taught her son with a chalkboard, and he changed the world. And Sundar, he would sit quietly in the evenings, sipping tea. Sometimes, he'd turn on the old radio. It still crackled, and in that sound, he heard her voice. Not loud, not famous, but forever strong.